Chosen one, listen carefully. This message did not find you by accident, and these words are not drifting through time without purpose. There is a reason your spirit felt a sudden pull, a quiet urgency, a knowing you could not explain. Right now, heaven is attentive. Right now, the atmosphere around your life is charged with meaning. What you are about to hear is not general encouragement, and it is not for the crowd. It is a direct alert to you, the one who has been waiting, praying, enduring, and wondering why the breakthrough you were promised seemed to stop just short of manifestation. Hear this clearly from the beginning. Your miracle was not canceled, it was not rejected, and it was not forgotten. Heaven paused it, and there is a reason for that pause. This is where many misunderstand. When things do not move according to expectation, the human heart quickly assumes loss. But divine timing does not operate on human conclusions. A pause in heaven is not silence. It is instruction being prepared. It is alignment being checked. It is protection being enforced. And in your case, the pause was intentional, precise, and deeply personal. The delay you felt was not punishment. It was mercy. It was heaven preventing a premature release that could not yet remain permanent. You were closer than you realized, but closeness without readiness can undo what God intends to last. Archangel Michael has been standing in authority over this moment, not as a symbol, not as metaphor, but as a messenger of divine order. His role is not gentle suggestion, it is enforcement of heaven's will. When he intervenes, it is because something significant is at stake. But with pause was not small. It required a level of spiritual alignment that you were in the process of developing, even though you may not have known it. Heaven saw what you could not yet see, that releasing the miracle too early would expose it to interference, distortion, or loss. So heaven paused, not to frustrate you, but to preserve you. This is why the urgency matters now. This is not a message to save for later. This is not something to revisit casually. The next few minutes are critical because alignment windows open and close. They are moments when obedience, awareness, and humility converge. You are in such a window right now. The reason you feel a slight pressure in your spirit, a sense that this moment is weighty, is because it is. Heaven is watching how you respond, not with fear, but with attention. Listening carefully is not a suggestion, is the key. You may have asked, why now? Why would heaven speak at this precise time, in this precise way? Because something shifted. Something in you matured through the waiting. Something hardened fell away. Something deeper formed. And now, what once would have overwhelmed you can be carried. What once would have been mishandled can now be stewarded. Heaven does not release power without responsibility, and it does not release miracles without maturity. The pause ensured that when the release comes, it stays. This message also comes as confirmation. You have sensed that something was unfinished, that the story was not over, even when circumstances tried to convince you otherwise. You felt it in quiet moments, when logic had no answer but your spirit still hoped. That was not denial, that was discernment. You were discerning that heaven had not closed the door. You were discerning the pause. And now, Archangel Michael reveals that the pause is ending, but not automatically. It requires your response. Understand this clearly. Heaven's pauses are not passive. They are interactive. They are invitations to alignment. They ask a question without words. Will you move into agreement, or will you remain in assumption? Will you listen, or will you rush ahead with old patterns? What you must do in the next few minutes is not complicated, but it is precise. And precision matters in spiritual matters. One small act of obedience can unlock what months of striving could not. This is why you are being told to listen carefully, not anxiously, not emotionally, carefully. Discernment is required now more than intensity. Many miracles are lost not because of disobedience but because of misinterpretation. People move too fast, speak too quickly, react too soon. Heaven paused your miracle to teach you how to move with God, not ahead of Him. That lesson is now complete, if you choose to apply it. There is also protection in this revelation. By understanding the pause, you are no longer tempted to force what must be released. You are no longer pressured to compare your timeline with others. Your journey required a different pace because your calling carries different weight. A miracle waiting for you is not fragile, but it is holy. And holy things are handled with care. As this part closes, let this truth settle deeply within you. Heaven did not hesitate because of lack of power. Heaven paused because of purpose. Archangel Michael did not intervene because of threat alone, but because of destiny. And you are being spoken to now because the conditions have changed. What comes next will explain exactly what heaven was waiting for, and how your next response determines whether the release becomes permanent. Listen closely, because what follows is the turning point you have been approaching all along. Now listen even more carefully, because understanding the nature of a heavenly pause will change the way you interpret everything you have been through. Many people confuse delay with denial, and that misunderstanding has caused unnecessary pain, doubt, and retreat. A delay feels heavy, like resistance. A denial feels final, like a door closing. But a divine pause is neither. A pause is intentional stillness commanded by God Himself. It is heaven holding its breath, not because it is unsure, but because it is precise. When heaven pauses, it is not withholding out of reluctance, it is preserving out of wisdom. A pause exists because something must be set in order before movement resumes. Think of it as a sacred inspection, not of your worth, but of your readiness. God does not pause miracles arbitrarily. He pauses them when timing, alignment, and authority must converge perfectly. In your life, this pause came because the miracle you asked for carries weight beyond what you initially realized. It was not just about relief or provision. It was about assignment. It was not only meant to bless you, but to position you. And positioning requires stability. Heaven saw something for me in you during the waiting season. While you felt forgotten, God was strengthening discernment. While you questioned yourself, God was stripping dependency on external validation. While you prayed for movement, God was refining motives. This is why the pause lasted longer than expected. Not because you were slow, but because the miracle was large. Small things can be released quickly. Great things must be anchored deeply, or they collapse under their own impact. Archangel Michael's involvement reveals the seriousness of this pause. He is not assigned to minor matters. His role is enforcement of divine order, protection of God's purposes, and defense of what heaven authorizes. The moment interference threatened to distort what was meant for you, heaven stepped in. The pause was a shield, and prevented premature exposure. It prevented contamination by fear, pride, or outside voices that could not steward what was coming. You were being protected even when it felt like you were being restrained. This is where spiritual maturity is tested. Immaturity demands answers immediately. Maturity learns to trust even when explanations are delayed. The pause invited you to grow from asking when to understanding why. And now that understanding is beginning to surface. Heaven is not asking you to relive the waiting, but to recognize what the waiting produced. Awareness is the bridge between pause and release. There is another reason heaven pauses miracles, and this one is often overlooked. Agreement. Heaven does not force miracles into lives that are not yet fully in agreement with God's will. Agreement is more than belief. It is alignment of thoughts, words, and actions. You may have believed that God could do it, but heaven was waiting for you to agree with how he would do it. That agreement is forming now. That is why this message resonates instead of confusing you. Something in you is saying, "This makes sense." That inner recognition is evidence that alignment is near completion. This is the moment where participation matters. This message is not meant to be heard passively. It is meant to be responded to. When heaven speaks, response activates movement. This is why I ask you now, as part of this sacred exchange, to acknowledge this moment. If these words are stirring something deep within you, if you recognize yourself as the one who has been waiting through a divine pause, then engage with this message. Let your response be intentional. Like the message, share it with someone who is also waiting. Leave a comment as a declaration that you are present, aware, and aligned. And if you have not yet done so, subscribe to this channel so you remain connected to messages that guide you through moments like this. These actions are not random. They are signals of agreement, both spiritually and practically. Do not underestimate the power of conscious engagement. Heaven watches for response, not performance. When you respond with clarity instead of confusion, movement begins. The pause ends when agreement is complete. And agreement is not loud. It is settled. You are being led into that settlement now. As part 2 closes, understand this truth. Nothing about your journey has been wasted. The pause refined you. The silence trained you. The waiting prepared you. Heaven did not stop your miracle. It safeguarded it. What comes next will reveal the test hidden within the silence and what heaven has been observing all along. And when you recognize that test, you will realize that the pause was never against you. It was always working for you. The silence you endured was not empty. It was not abandonment, and it was not confusion in heaven. It was a test, subtle, sacred, and deeply revealing. This is the part most people never understand, because silence feels like absence when it is actually observation. When you were waiting, heaven was watching. Not to judge you, but to see what would rise in you when there were no visible signs to hold on to. Silence reveals what noise can hide. And in that silence, a spiritual test was unfolding around your life. This test was not about how loudly you prayed or how long you waited. It was about what ruled your inner world when answers did not come. Heaven was watching to see whether fear would take the throne, or whether trust would quietly stand guard. Many speak faith when circumstances cooperate. Few maintain alignment when the atmosphere feels still. You were being trained in that stillness. Every moment you chose patience over panic, humility over accusation, and hope over bitterness. Something was recorded in the spirit. You may not have realized it, but the silence exposed layers within you that could not be revealed any other way. It exposed where you still sought control instead of surrender. It revealed where you leaned on understanding instead of trust. And it also revealed where your faith was genuine, even when shaken. Heaven does not test to disqualify. Heaven tests to refine. The silence was not meant to break you. It was meant to shape you into someone who could carry what was coming without losing peace, identity, or direction. During this season, Archangel Michael was not distant. He was active in ways you could not see. While you felt stillness, there was movement in the unseen. Opposition was being restrained. Interference was being intercepted. What tried to approach your destiny without authorization was blocked. This is why some attacks never reached you, even though you sensed they were coming. This is why certain doors closed suddenly, and certain connections faded without explanation. The silence was not inactivity, it was protection in operation. The test hidden in the silence was also about obedience without confirmation. Would you continue to walk uprightly even when you did not feel rewarded? Would you maintain integrity when no immediate breakthrough followed? Would you still believe God was good when circumstances felt neutral instead of favorable? These questions were not asked with words, but with time, and time revealed your answers. You may have felt moments of frustration, even moments of doubt. That did not disqualify you. What mattered was that you did not quit. You did not harden your heart. You did not turn bitter. Even when you questioned, you stayed open. Even when you were tired, you remained receptive. That posture matters more than perfection. Heaven responds to posture. There is another layer to this test that few recognize. Silence tests whether you are more attached to the miracle or to the God who gives it. This is not condemnation, it is clarity. Heaven wanted to ensure that what you receive will not replace your dependence on God, but deepen it. The pause allowed your desire to be purified. It shifted your focus from outcome to obedience. That shift is powerful because it means the miracle will bless you without ruling you. As this realization settles in, something should feel different. Not louder, not dramatic, but steadier. That steadiness is evidence that the dust is ending. When understanding replaces confusion, silence has completed its assignment. You are no longer interpreting the pause as rejection. You are recognizing it as preparation. That recognition is what signals heaven that you are ready for the next phase. Before we move forward, receive this blessing intentionally. This is not symbolic. It is declarative. Type "I am aligned with heaven" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 481 is now activated. As you do, let this final truth anchor you. The silence did not mean heaven stopped listening. It meant heaven was listening more closely than ever. And what comes next will make sense of everything you endured. Hold on. What comes next changes everything. As this silence breaks and clarity begins to flow, I need to speak directly to those who feel stirred right now. When God allows light to reach you, it is never meant to stop with you. He says, as you sow into this ground, I will turn it into a river for many. If this message unlocked understanding in your spirit, then you are being invited to help unlock it for others who are still waiting in the silence. I am asking you personally to respond through super thanks, channel membership, or PayPal, because this work carries fire meant to reach souls across the world. Your seed becomes oil that keeps this message burning. The PayPal donation link is in the description, and a PayPal QR code will appear on the screen. Do not delay what God is prompting. Move now, and let heaven mark your obedience with increase and covering. Now we come to a truth that must be spoken gently, yet clearly, because it explains why the flow stopped at the very edge of release. There was one misalignment. Not obvious, not intentional, and not rooted in rebellion, but subtle enough to interrupt momentum. This is often the most difficult kind to recognize, because it hides beneath good intentions and sincere effort. You were doing many things right, yet one inner posture was slightly out of position. Heaven does not require perfection, but it does require alignment. This misalignment was not about sin in the way people commonly think of it. It was not about moral failure or disobedience in action. It was about timing and control. At some point during the waiting, your heart began to lean toward managing the outcome rather than trusting the process. This did not happen out of arrogance. It happened out of weariness. When waiting stretches long, the soul naturally looks for certainty. You wanted assurance. You wanted clarity. You wanted to know how it would unfold. But heaven was asking for something different: surrender without full visibility. Control is subtle. It disguises itself as responsibility, planning, and wisdom. But spiritually, control can become resistance when it replaces trust. Heaven paused not because you stopped believing, but because belief began to coexist with anxiety about the method. You trusted God would act, but part of you wanted to decide when and how. That small internal negotiation was enough to disrupt flow, not as punishment, but as prevention. Another layer of misalignment involved expectation. Expectations are not wrong, but unexamined expectations can become limitations. You expected the miracle to arrive in a familiar form, through a predictable channel, or within a certain emotional tone. Heaven does not always meet expectations. It fulfills promises. Sometimes those two things look different. The pause allowed God to gently loosen your grip on the version you imagined so you could receive the version that would last. This is where many people unknowingly delay themselves. They pray for release while holding tightly to assumptions. They ask for new outcomes while clinging to old frameworks. Heaven waits patiently for that internal shift, because releasing power into rigid expectations can distort the blessing. What you were waiting for required flexibility, humility, and openness to surprise. The pause created space for that transformation. There was also a misalignment in how you viewed yourself during the waiting. At times, you questioned whether you were still worthy, still chosen, still qualified. Those thoughts did not disqualify you, but they revealed an identity tension. Heaven does not release miracles to validate identity. It releases them to expand assignment. Your worth was never under review. But heaven needed you to stop measuring yourself by progress and start anchoring yourself in calling. When identity stabilizes, authority flows. This misalignment did not mean you failed the test. It meant the test was still teaching. And now, the lesson is coming into focus. You are being invited to release the need to understand everything before moving forward. Faith is not the absence of questions. It is the refusal to let questions govern obedience. Heaven waits for that shift because it signals readiness to steward what is coming without fear. Correction in the spiritual realm is not condemnation. It is course adjustment. Think of it as a gentle but firm recalibration. When alignment is restored, movement resumes quickly. This is why this revelation matters now. The pause was not permanent. It was conditional. And the condition was awareness. Once you see what needs to shift, the shift itself becomes simple. You may feel a quiet conviction as you listen. Not shame, not heaviness, but recognition. That recognition is grace. It is heaven inviting you to realign, not accusing you of error. When God corrects, He does so to protect the outcome. What is coming to you must not only arrive, it must remain. It must endure seasons, pressure, and growth. Alignment ensures longevity. As you begin to let go of control, release expectations, and stabilize identity, something begins to unlock internally. Peace replaces tension. Trust replaces urgency. Confidence replaces comparison. These are signs that alignment is returning. And when alignment returns, heaven does not hesitate. Heaven moves swiftly, because order has been restored. Understand this deeply. The pause did not expose weakness to shame you. It exposed it to heal you. A misalignment did not delay the miracle to frustrate you. It delayed it to secure it. What you are stepping into requires a posture that can sustain blessing without losing humility and power without losing dependence. As this part closes, let this truth settle. Alignment is not about doing more. It is about releasing what no longer belongs in your hands. When you let go, heaven steps in. When you surrender timing, heaven releases authority. The flow did not stop because you were wrong. It paused because you were becoming ready. And readiness is now closer than ever. What comes now is not meant to comfort you, but to steady you. Archangel Michael does not deliver warnings to frighten the chosen. He delivers them to protect momentum at critical thresholds. A warning from heaven is never punishment. It is preparation. It is the voice of divine order stepping in before something sacred is mishandled or delayed further. And right now, you are standing at such a point. This is not drama. This is precision. The warning is simple, yet weighty. Do not misinterpret this moment as optional. Heaven had been patient, intentional, and merciful, but patience is not permission to remain still forever. There are seasons when waiting is obedience, and there are seasons when waiting becomes disobedience. Archangel Michael is revealing that the season has shifted. What was once protected by stillness must now be honored by response. Ignoring this shift does not cancel your destiny, but it does complicate its unfolding. This warning addresses hesitation that disguises itself as wisdom. You may feel the urge to double-check, to wait for one more sign, one more confirmation, one more sense of certainty. But understand this: there comes a moment when too much confirmation becomes avoidance. Heaven has already spoken in layers, through inner conviction, repeated patterns, timely messages, and now through direct revelation. A warning is not against discernment. It is against delay born from fear of responsibility. Archangel Michael also warns against spiritual numbness. Long waiting can dull sensitivity. When prayers seem unanswered, the heart can quietly shift into survival mode, doing what is necessary to endure rather than what is required to advance. Survival kept you alive during the pause, but it cannot lead you into the release. The warning is clear: do not carry a survival mindset into a season of movement. What sustained you then will restrain you now. There is also a warning concerning emotional residue from the waiting. Disappointment, even when subtle, can linger beneath faith. You may still be carrying unanswered why questions that have not fully healed. Archangel Michael warns that unresolved disappointment can interfere with obedience because it filters God's instructions through past pain. Before moving forward, you must be willing to trust God again, not just believe in Him. Trust is deeper than belief. Trust moves when clarity is incomplete. Another dimension of this warning involves misplaced responsibility. During the pause, you may have felt pressure to fix, manage, or compensate for what was not moving. That pressure trained you to overfunction. Heaven now warns you to release that habit. The next phase is not sustained by your effort, but by your agreement. Carrying unnecessary responsibility will exhaust you and distort the miracle. What God releases next must remain under His governance, not yours. Archangel Michael also speaks a warning about comparison. Looking at others' timelines, outcomes, or testimonies during this transition will weaken discernment. Comparison introduces impatience, and impatience leads to premature action. Your journey has required a different pace because it carries a different weight. What is coming to you must not be rushed to resemble someone else's story. The warning is firm. Keep your eyes forward, not sideways. There is compassion in this warning because heaven recognizes your fatigue. You have endured uncertainty longer than most. You have remained faithful without applause, clarity, or reassurance. But fatigue must not become an excuse for disengagement. Archangel Michael warns that the enemy often targets the weary, not with temptation, but with passivity. Doing nothing feels safe when tired, but safety is not always obedience. Rest is holy, but stagnation is not. His warning also addresses obedience filtered through logic. Logic will always demand explanation before movement. Faith moves and then understands. Archangel Michael warns that trying to map every outcome before acting will keep you at the threshold. Some doors only explain themselves once you step through them. The next instruction you receive may feel small, even ordinary, but it carries disproportionate authority. Treat it with respect. Do not mistake this warning for harshness. Heaven is not frustrated with you. Heaven is invested in you. Warnings are given only to those who matter. They are signs of trust. Archangel Michael is not guarding against your failure. He is guarding against delay that would drain joy from what is meant to be received with peace. As pressure begins to lift and movement begins to stir, resistance may briefly increase. This is not a signal to retreat. It is confirmation that authority is shifting. Archangel Michael warns against interpreting resistance as misalignment. Often, resistance appears because alignment is nearly complete. Stand firm. Do not second-guess what you have already discerned. As this part closes, receive this warning as an act of love. You are being called to attention, not anxiety. The pause has done its work. The lesson has been learned. What remains is response. Honor this moment. Move with clarity, humility, and trust. Heaven has spoken because heaven is ready to act. Now we must address what often remains hidden even from sincere hearts: the quiet resistance within. Fear and doubt do not always arrive loudly. They do not always announce themselves as disbelief. More often, they slip in disguised as caution, logic, or self-protection. During the pause, these inner forces did not disappear. They waited. And now, as heaven prepares to move, they must be confronted, not aggressively, but honestly. Fear is not always panic. Sometimes it is restraint. It is the voice that says, "What if this goes wrong?" Or "What if I am disappointed again?" It remembers past pain and tries to prevent future hurt. Fear does not mean you lack faith. It means you remember. But memory must not lead. Fear's role is to inform, not to govern. When fear governs, it subtly resists divine movement by slowing response. Heaven does not condemn fear, but it does not yield to it either. Doubt operates similarly. It does not always deny God's power. Sometimes it questions your qualification. Doubt asks whether you heard correctly, whether you are ready, whether this promise truly applies to you. During the waiting, doubt may have grown quieter, but it did not disappear. It simply settled into the background. Now that release is near, doubt tries to regain influence, because doubt thrives at thresholds. Your resistance is not rebellion. It is unresolved tension between desire and trust. Part of you wants what God promised. Another part fears the responsibility that comes with it. Miracles change things. They alter routines, expectations, and relationships. Here, resistance forms when the soul senses change but has not yet made peace with it. Heaven waits for that peace because unrest distorts stewardship. This is why alignment is internal before it is external. You can appear ready outwardly while inwardly hesitating. Heaven sees both. The pause gave you time to surface these hidden tensions so they could be addressed gently rather than forcefully. Fear and doubt were not enemies during the pause. They were signals showing where healing and reassurance were needed. One common form of resistance is self-protection. You learned how to survive disappointment. You learned how to lower expectations so loss would hurt less. That survival strategy was necessary at one point, but it cannot accompany you forward. What protected you during the pause will restrict you during the release. Heaven now invites you to unlearn self-protection and relearn trust. This is not vulnerability without wisdom. It is surrender with discernment. Another layer of resistance comes from identity shifts. You are not the same person who first prayed for this miracle. Growth has occurred. Maturity has formed. But part of you still sees yourself through the lens of who you were when you began waiting. That outdated self-image can resist stepping into new authority. Doubt says, you are not that person yet. Heaven responds, you already are. Alignment requires updating how you see yourself. Fear also resists permanence. Temporary blessings feel safer because they carry less responsibility. Permanent release requires consistency, accountability, and endurance. Heaven paused your miracle because it was meant to last. In your resistance questions whether you can sustain it. This is where trust must deepen, not trust in yourself, but trust in God's sustaining grace. What God releases, He also maintains. Notice that heaven does not demand that fear and doubt vanish before movement begins. He asks that they surrender leadership. You do not need perfect confidence to obey. You need willingness. Willingness signals alignment more than certainty ever could. Heaven moves where willingness is present. As these inner dynamics surface, do not judge yourself. Awareness is progress. Recognition is alignment beginning. You are not being asked to fix yourself. You are being asked to yield yourself. Yielding removes resistance without force. It allows fear to rest and doubt to quiet without confrontation. There is also resistance rooted in timing fatigue. Waiting trained you to expect delay. Now that movement approaches, your nervous system may still be braced for disappointment. This is normal. Heaven understands this. But heaven also invites you to reset expectation. The pause taught patience. The release will teach reception. You must allow yourself to receive without suspicion. Inner resistance weakens when you stop rehearsing past delays and start responding to present instruction. Alignment happens in the present moment, not in memory. What God is doing now is not constrained by what did not happen before. You are not returning to the same moment. You are stepping into a new one. As this part closes, let this truth settle gently. Fear and doubt were not signs that you were unworthy. They were signs that you were human. Heaven did not pause because of them. Heaven paused to heal them. Inner resistance is loosening now because understanding has replaced confusion. You are not being rushed. You are being readied. When fear steps aside and doubt releases control, heaven finds clear passage. And that passage is opening now. Now we arrive at what heaven has been patiently shaping all along, the exact spiritual posture required for release. This is not about effort, performance, or proving worth. It is about position. In the spiritual realm, posture determines flow. You can desire the right thing, pray the right prayers, and wait the right amount of time, yet still misalignment if posture is off by even a small degree. Heaven responds to posture because posture reveals agreement. The posture heaven requires is not outward appearance. It is not how calm you look, how strong you sound, or how faithful you appear to others. It is the internal stance of your heart toward God's authority. True alignment begins when you stop trying to manage outcomes and start yielding governance. This is not weakness. It is spiritual authority expressed directly. Authority in the kingdom flows through surrender, not control. Many assume alignment means doing more prayer, more discipline, more effort. But in your case, alignment means releasing what you were never meant to carry. During the pause, you carried responsibility that belonged to God. You carried timing. You carried pressure. You carried expectation. Heaven allowed this for a season so you could recognize the weight. Now, posture requires you to set it down. What you release creates space for heaven to move. The posture heaven seeks is humility without insecurity. Humility says, God, you lead. Insecurity says, I am not enough. These are not the same. Heaven does not respond to insecurity. It heals it. Heaven responds to humility because humility creates clear channels. When you no longer need to prove readiness, readiness is established. When you no longer fear being overlooked, authority is entrusted. Another essential element of this posture is receptivity. Receptivity is not passive waiting, it is open readiness. It is the ability to receive without resistance, suspicion, or self-sabotage. Some people unknowingly block miracles because they do not know how to receive without questioning their right to it. Heaven now requires you to receive as an act of obedience, not entitlement and not reluctance. Posture also involves agreement with God's pace. You no longer rush ahead, but you also no longer lag behind. You move where he moves. You pause where he pauses. This synchronized movement is powerful because it keeps you within divine protection. Outrunning God leads to burnout. Lagging behind leads to missed opportunities. Alignment keeps you centered. Here is also a posture of listening that heaven requires now. Not frantic listening for constant instruction, but settled attentiveness. Listening that trusts God will speak when needed. Listening that does not panic in silence. This posture says, I am available, not anxious. Availability invites guidance. Anxiety repels clarity. Heaven speaks clearly to hearts that are still enough to hear. Another aspect of this posture is release of comparison. You no longer measure your journey by someone else's progress. Alignment requires singular focus. When you stop dividing attention, power consolidates. Heaven does not pour into distracted vessels. Focus is not intensity, it is devotion without fragmentation. You are also being asked to adopt a posture of gratitude before manifestation. Gratitude is not denial of longing. It is recognition of faithfulness. Gratitude stabilizes the heart so that when the miracle arrives, it does not shock your system. Heaven prepares receivers as carefully as it prepares gifts. Gratitude proves readiness to steward joy without losing balance. One of the most important postures now is peace with uncertainty. Not resignation, but peace. Peace says, I trust God even if I do not yet see the full picture. This peace signals maturity. It tells heaven that you will not panic if circumstances shift during the release process. Peace keeps you grounded when movement accelerates. Understand this. Posture is not something you perform once and forget. It is a state you maintain. But maintaining it does not require strain. It requires awareness. Awareness of when control tries to return. Awareness of when fear whispers again. Awareness of when impatience resurfaces. Each time you notice, you realign. That realignment keeps the channel clear. The signs that posture is correct are subtle but powerful. Tension decreases. Clarity increases. Urgency fades without momentum stopping. You feel ready without feeling rushed. You feel confident without feeling pressured. These are indicators that alignment is active. As this part closes, receive this truth deeply. Heaven has not been waiting for you to become someone else. Heaven has been guiding you into the correct position. Position unlocks pavilion. Posture unlocks permanence. What is coming requires stability more than speed. You are being positioned to receive without losing yourself, to move forward without leaving peace behind. And when posture is right, release follows naturally. This is the turning point. This is the moment when what was prepared in silence begins to move in the unseen. When alignment is restored, heaven does not hesitate. There is no second guessing, no reluctance, no delay for deliberation. Movement begins quietly but decisively. You may not hear thunder or see instant change, but something has already shifted. The moment posture aligned, the pause lost its purpose. Heaven responds to alignment with acceleration. What you must understand now is that the release does not always announce itself outwardly first. Often, the first sign is internal. A calm replaces pressure. A certainty replaces confusion. A sense of readiness settles without anxiety. These are not emotions. They are confirmations. When heaven begins to move, it stabilizes the receiver before it changes the environment. You are feeling steadier not because nothing is happening, but because something is finally secure. Archangel Michael responds to obedience with protection. As movement begins, he reinforces boundaries around what is being released. This is why you may notice sudden clarity about what no longer belongs in your life. Certain conversations lose their pull. Certain distractions lose their appeal. Certain fears lose their voice. These are not losses, they are safeguard. Heaven removes what could interfere before it delivers what must endure. Acceleration in the spiritual realm does not always look fast in the natural at first. It looks ordered. Pieces begin to line up. Timing starts to make sense. Delays that once frustrated you now reveal why they were necessary. You begin to see connections where there were only questions. This is a sign that heaven's order is being restored around your situation. Another sign of movement is confirmation without striving. You stop trying to convince yourself. You stop asking for reassurance. Instead, confirmation comes through peace. Peace is heaven's signature. It does not argue. It settles. When peace arrives without explanation, it is because explanation is no longer needed. Alignment has spoken louder than doubt ever could. You may also notice that opposition changes form. Instead of direct resistance, it becomes irrelevant. What once distracted you no longer holds weight. What once discouraged you no longer slows you. This is not because you became stronger, but because authority shifted. Archangel Michael enforces boundaries that opposition cannot cross once release is authorized. Understand this clearly. The turning point is not dramatic. It is decisive. Heaven does not need spectacle to act. It needs agreement. And agreement has been established. What was paused is now in motion, but it will unfold in a way that preserves peace. Heaven values sustainability over shock. There is also a sealing happening now. When alignment is restored, heaven seals the work so it cannot be easily undone. The sealing brings permanence. The miracle is not released as something fragile, but as something rooted. It will not depend on emotional highs or perfect circumstances. It will be anchored in divine order. This is why you are being reminded to stay attentive. Not anxious, not watchful in fear, but aware. Awareness allows you to move with what heaven is doing instead of reacting to what it is undoing. Reaction belongs to the old season. Cooperation belongs to the new one. As movement begins, patience takes on a new meaning. You are no longer waiting for something to start. You are allowing something to unfold. That difference matters. Unfolding requires trust. It also requires consistency. Do not abandon the posture that brought alignment just because movement has begun. Posture sustains what alignment unlocks. Now receive this blessing with intention, because it marks this turning point. Type "I receive divine movement" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 936 is now activated. As you do, let this truth anchor you. Heaven does not reverse once alignment is complete. What begins now is not temporary. It is protected, guided, and sustained. You are not stepping into chaos. You are stepping into order. And there is still more to be revealed, something you will be glad you stayed for, because what comes next explains the exact action that secures this release permanently. As heaven begins to move and order is restored, this is where obedience becomes impact. When God releases clarity to you, it is because others are waiting for that same light. He says, "What you place in my hands, I will multiply into streams for many." I am speaking to you personally now. This is your moment to act through super thanks, channel membership, or PayPal, because your seed fuels the spreading of this prophetic word. Your giving becomes oil that keeps the fire burning for souls across nations. The PayPal donation link is in the description, and the PayPal QR code will flash on the screen. Move now in obedience, and let heaven respond to your action with increase, covering, and divine return. Now we come to the most critical and time-sensitive moment of this entire message, because understanding alone will not secure what heaven has just set into motion. Revelation without response expires. Alignment without action weakens. Heaven has already moved. The pause has lifted, and authority has been released. But permanence is established only through obedience. This is where destinies either stabilize or slip back into unnecessary cycles. What you must do now is not dramatic, but it is decisive. The action heaven requires from you is not about effort. It is about agreement expressed through movement. During the pause, waiting was obedience. In this moment, waiting becomes resistance. That shift is subtle, and many miss it. Heaven does not always announce when seasons change, but it makes it clear to those who are listening. You are being asked to respond now, because momentum is active. Spiritual momentum is like a current. You move with it, or you lose its advantage. The first part of this action is verbal alignment. Words are not empty. In the spiritual realm, words establish authority and direction. You must intentionally speak agreement with what God is doing. This means releasing control over timing, methods, and outcomes, and declaring trust in God's process aloud. Not internally, not vaguely, but clearly. Spoken agreement seals internal alignment. When your words come into harmony with heaven's will, resistance loses its foothold. The second part of this action is practical obedience. There is something specific you have been prompted to do. It may be a conversation you have delayed, a decision you have postponed, a habit you have been instructed to release, or a step you have been hesitant to take because it felt uncomfortable or uncertain. That is the action. Heaven often ties large releases to small acts of obedience because they reveal trust without spectacle. Delaying this step now does not cancel the miracle, but it weakens permanence and can reset unnecessary waiting. This is why the next few minutes matter. Not because God is impatient, but because alignment windows are precise. When heaven opens a window, response must match timing. Postponement in moments like this is not neutral, it is directional. Acting now strengthens flow. Delaying now creates drag. Heaven is not pressuring you, it is inviting you to cooperate. There is also a visible component to this action, and it matters more than you think. Faith was never meant to remain hidden. If this message resonates with you, acknowledge it openly. Like this video as a sign of agreement. Share it so someone else who is waiting can recognize their moment. Leave a comment declaring that you are moving in alignment with heaven. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do so now, not casually, but intentionally. These actions are not just engagement, they are declarations. They say, I am present, I am responsive, I am aligned. Heaven honors conscious response. Do not underestimate the spiritual significance of engagement. Engagement signals agreement. Agreement invites reinforcement. Reinforcement strengthens permanence. What looks small in the natural carries weight in the spiritual. This is how obedience becomes acceleration. Another part of the action required now is restraint. As movement begins, resist the urge to over-explain, over-announce, or seek validation. Not everyone needs access to what heaven is releasing in you. Silence in this season is not waiting, it is wisdom. Protect what is unfolding. Let fruit speak later. What is secured quietly often lasts longest. You may feel an urge to look for immediate visible proof that something has changed. Release that urge. Permanence is not always loud at first. Sometimes it begins as stability instead of excitement. What matters is that alignment remains intact. Continue in the posture that brought you here, humble, receptive, attentive. Do not revert to old habits of control or over-analysis just because movement has begun. This action also requires trust beyond feeling. You may not feel dramatically different after acting. That does not mean nothing happened. Faith does not rely on sensation. It relies on obedience. Once alignment is expressed through action, heaven takes responsibility for the outcome. Your role is not to manage results, but to maintain agreement. Be aware of this. Moments like this do not repeat endlessly in the same form. Heaven is gracious, but momentum shifts. Acting now allows you to move forward cleanly, without revisiting lessons you have already learned. Choosing not to act complicates what could be simple. Heaven prefers progress over repetition. As this part closes, receive this truth with clarity. The action required now is the bridge between release and permanence. You are not being asked to strive, impress, or perform. You are being asked to respond. Respond with trust. Respond with clarity. Respond without delay. What you do in this moment carries weight beyond what you can see, and you will be glad you stayed attentive, because what comes next reveals how heaven seals what has just been released permanently. Now we turn our attention to what happens after obedience has been given and alignment has been maintained. This is where many people relax too early or misunderstand the nature of divine release. When heaven unlocks something permanently, it does not always arrive as sudden fireworks. Often, it comes as a quiet but irreversible shift. What breaks loose after the release is not chaos, not excess, and not emotional overwhelm. It is order. It is clarity. It is stability. And that stability is the evidence that heaven has sealed what was promised. One of the first things you will notice is an internal settling. The constant inner questioning begins to fade. The mental loops that kept replaying what if and when lose their urgency. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop striving. Peace begins to guard your thoughts, not because everything is visible yet, but because everything is now secure. Heaven releases peace as confirmation before it releases visible change, because peace protects the miracle from interference. You may also notice that situations which once strained you no longer have the same power. Old triggers lose their grip. Conversations that once stirred anxiety no longer control your emotional state. This is not numbness. It is authority. When heaven releases something permanently, it also removes the emotional hooks that could pull you back into old cycles. Freedom is not loud. It is steady. Another sign of what breaks loose is clarity of direction. You may suddenly know what to do next without overthinking it. Decisions that once felt heavy become simple. This clarity does not come from having more information. It comes from having alignment. When alignment is complete, guidance flows naturally. You stop forcing answers and start receiving them. You may also experience a shift in relationships. Some connections deepen because they align with where you are going. Others fade quietly because they belong to a previous season. This is not loss, it is sortie. Heaven removes friction so movement can continue without unnecessary resistance. What remains will support what hath been released. There is also an increase in discernment. You become more aware of what deserves your attention and what does not. Distractions lose their appeal. You are no longer drawn to noise. This is a sign that authority has increased. Authority sharpens focus. Focus preserves momentum. One of the most important things that breaks loose after release is consistency. You are no longer riding emotional highs and lows. Faith becomes steady instead of reactive. You trust God not because you feel inspired every moment, but because you have seen His faithfulness proven through alignment. This consistency is what keeps the miracle from slipping back into delay. Opposition does not disappear entirely, but its influence changes. Instead of blocking progress, it becomes confirmation that progress is happening. Resistance loses its power to confuse you. You no longer interpret challenges as signs you are wrong. You recognize them as part of forward movement. The shift in interpretation protects your peace. Heaven also places a seal over what hath been released. This seal is spiritual authority that prevents easy reversal. What God unlocks permanently is not subject to emotional instability or external opinion. It is anchored in divine order. This does not mean you never face challenges. It means challenges no longer threaten the foundation. You may find that your prayers change. You pray less out of desperation and more out of agreement. Gratitude replaces urgency. Confidence replaces pleading. This change in prayer language is a sign that your position has shifted. You are no longer asking from uncertainty. You are speaking from alignment. Another thing that breaks loose is patience of a different kind. Not the patience of waiting, but the patience of trust. You are no longer counting days or watching clocks. You are allowing unfolding. This patience is powerful because it removes pressure from the process. Pressure disrupts permanence. Trust sustains it. It is important to understand that after release, maintenance matters. Not maintenance through effort, but through awareness. Stay grounded in the posture that brought alignment. If old habits of control or fear try to return, recognize them quickly and realign gently. This is not regression, it is stewardship. What is stewarded remains. As this part closes, let this truth settle deeply within you. What hath been released is not fragile. It does not depend on perfect circumstances or flawless behavior. It depends on continued alignment. Heaven has done its part. You have responded. Now what unfolds will do so with stability, clarity, and protection. What broke loose was not just a miracle, but a new way of moving forward, one that cannot be easily undone. This part is for the heart that still carries quiet questions, even after everything you have heard. It is for the one who believes yet occasionally wonders, is this truly for me? Heaven is aware of that inner dialogue, and it is not offended by it. In fact, this moment exists because God knows that reassurance is sometimes needed, not to convince you, but to strengthen you. Confirmation is not a sign of weak faith. It is a gift of divine care. You may be thinking back over your journey, replaying moments where you thought the promise had slipped away, times when circumstances contradicted what you believed you heard, seasons when nothing moved you, nothing changed, and silence seemed louder than hope. It is natural to ask whether this message truly applies to you, or whether it is simply comforting words at the right time. But understand this, comfort alone does not carry authority. What you are sensing now is not comfort, it is recognition. Confirmation often arrives as familiarity. Something in this message feels known, as if it is naming what you could never fully explain. That sense of "this is about me" is not imagination. It is resonance. Heaven confirms through resonance, not pressure. If this were not for you, it would pass through you without landing. The fact that it stays with you, stirs you, and settles you is evidence of its relevance. Another form of confirmation is timing. Ask yourself honestly, why now? Why did this message reach you at this exact moment, after everything you have already endured? Heaven does not speak randomly. God is intentional with timing because timing protects meaning. If this message had come earlier, you may not have understood it. If it came later, you may have grown weary. It came now because now you are able to receive it. You may also notice that resistance within you has softened. The need to argue, analyze, or dismiss what you are hearing has quieted. Instead, there is a calm acceptance, even if full understanding is still forming. That is confirmation. When truth arrives, it does not demand agreement. It invites rest. What is true settles the soul. Heaven also confirms through alignment with your history. Think back to the prayers you prayed when no one else knew, the promises you held quietly, the moments you felt set apart, even when you did not understand why. This message does not introduce something foreign. It connects threads that were already there. Confirmation feels like completion, not surprise. You may wonder why assurance is needed at this stage. It is because what comes next requires confidence without arrogance. Heaven wants you to move forward without constantly looking back for proof. Doubt drains momentum. Confirmation restores it. God confirms not because he is unsure, but because he wants you secure. Another sign of confirmation is peace that does not depend on outcome. You may still not see everything clearly, but you feel anchored. That anchoring is not emotional, it is spiritual. When God confirms something, he anchors you so that external fluctuations do not shake internal certainty. You are being stabilized for what is ahead. It is also important to understand that confirmation does not mean absence of challenge. It means clarity of direction. You may still face moments that test your trust, but those tests will not confuse you the way they once did. You now know where you are going, even if you do not yet see the full path. Direction matters more than detail. If part of you still hesitates, wondering whether you are reading too much into this, let this reassure you. God does not speak to tease. He does not awaken hope only to withdraw it. Heaven does not initiate alignment without intention to complete it. What has been stirred will be fulfilled, not because of your certainty, but because of God's faithfulness. This message also confirms that you were not wrong for waiting, and you were not foolish for hoping. Your endurance was not wasted. Heaven witnessed every unseen choice you made to remain open instead of bitter, receptive instead of hardened. Those choices mattered more than you know. They positioned you for this moment of clarity. As this part closes, receive this confirmation gently. You do not need to force belief or silence every question. Let assurance grow naturally. Let peace deepen. Let trust settle. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not mistaken. You are exactly where you need to be, hearing exactly what you need to hear, at exactly the right time. Heaven has confirmed this moment so you can move forward without looking back. Now we close this message not with uncertainty, but with assurance. Not with tension, but with peace. Everything you have heard was not meant to overwhelm you. It was meant to steady you. Heaven does not reveal truth to confuse the chosen. It reveals truth to anchor them. And as this message comes to its end, one thing must be clear above all else. Your miracle is not fragile, not temporary, and not in danger of being withdrawn. It is alive, protected, and governed by divine authority. The pause that once confused you has now revealed its purpose. The silence that once tested you has now refined you. The waiting that once stretched you has now prepared you. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Every step, every delay, every internal shift was part of a precise divine process designed not just to bless you, but to sustain you. What heaven releases into your life now is meant to remain. You are not stepping forward alone. Heaven goes before you. The same authority that paused the miracle now secures it. The same divine order that protected you in waiting now guides you in movement. You are not required to maintain this outcome through effort or fear. You are required only to remain aligned. Alignment is your rest. Alignment is your covering. As you move forward, remember this: peace is your compass. When peace remains, you are within God's order. When peace fades, realignment, not panic, is the answer. You are no longer guessing. You are no longer striving. You are walking with awareness. That awareness will keep you steady through changes, growth, and unfolding blessings. Heaven also assures you of this: what is released now will not collapse under pressure. It has been tested in silence. It has been strengthened in delay. It has been sealed through obedience. You will not lose it the way you lost things before, because this time you are not receiving from desperation, but from alignment. That makes all the difference. Let gratitude become your language moving forward. Not forced gratitude, but settled gratitude. Gratitude keeps your heart open without becoming anxious. Gratitude honors God without demanding explanation. Gratitude protects joy. As you practice gratitude, you will notice that peace deepens and clarity continues to unfold. You may still encounter moments that require trust. That is part of growth, not failure. But those moments will not undo what heaven has secured. You are no longer in a fragile place. You are standing on firm ground. What God has established will not be easily shaken. Now receive this final blessing intentionally. This is not symbolic. It is declarative and sealing. Type IT is sealed in the comments if this message has aligned with your spirit. Blessing code 1143 is now activated. As you do, let these words rest in you. You are seen, you are guided, and you are covered. Heaven has not finished with you. This is not the end of the story. It is the stabilization of a new chapter. Walk forward with humility, confidence, and peace. What was paused has been released. What was delayed has been secured. And what heaven has sealed, no force can reverse. As this message seals and peace settles, this is where obedience becomes legacy. God says, "What you place into my work, I will cause to overflow into lives you may never meet." I am speaking to you directly now. This word did not end with you because it was never meant to stop with you. Release your support through Super Thanks, channel membership, or PayPal, and let your seed become a river of light for others who are still waiting for clarity. The PayPal donation link is in the description, and the PayPal QR code will appear on the screen. Move now in obedience, and let heaven mark your giving as a prophetic act that multiplies, protects, and returns to you in divine measure.